Back in another century, when I was a university student in Hobart, I achieved the dubious honor of editing the student newspaper Togatus. A Latin word of masculine gender, togatus simply meant wearing a toga. To me the banner made no sense, and in that new age of sexual equality I wanted to change it to the more gender-neutral title of knickers, as in anything you say will be taken down, but they wouldn't let me. I got the job possibly because there wasn't much competition. It came with onerous deadlines and paid only a pittance, but back in those wonderful days of the late 60s you could buy a large bottle of Cascade Blue for 50c, and there were lots of girls who wanted to be journalists. We had editorial meetings along the waterfront bar of the now-defunct Travelers Rest Hotel. There was nothing bespectacled and geeky about the job. It seemed pretty cool back then, publishing a notorious and radical student newspaper in a conservative small town during the appalling misadventures of the Vietnam War. We ran excerpts from banned books like The Very Funny Portnoy's Complaint by the now acclaimed author Philip Roth. We broke the Crimes Act with articles on how to avoid conscription. We famously outed the campus ASIO spy, not only publishing his identity, a serious crime even today, but also rearranging the white stones of the Keen's Curry sign in South Hobart to spell out his name. Apart from being briefly interviewed by a patient Commonwealth policeman and being called in for a cup of tea with a charmingly tolerant state attorney general, there were no repercussions. I went on to find employment with the ABC and later the 9 Network and never had trouble getting high-level security clearances. The truth was that we were privileged middle-class kids, merely transitional radicals, inevitably bound for a life of boring bourgeois respectability. The government had nothing to fear from us and they knew it. Those of us who came out of student newspapers into mainstream media in the 70s had it easy. There was an abundance of jobs. Most capital cities had 2 or more newspapers, often with morning and afternoon editions. Even in Hobart the Mercury published an evening edition on Saturdays. The ABC ran the cheeky lefty This Day Tonight in every state capital, and almost everyone who worked on it was absurdly young and had come out of student newspapers. They paid us surprisingly well, but it was so much fun we would have done it for nothing. Recently I spent a week in a newsroom that reminded me of the outrageous fun of my journalistic youth. Darwin's NT News doesn't just report the news but makes news around the world with such grabbing headlines as Why I Stuck a Cracker Up My Clacker and Hit in Head by Flying Dildo. One was a drunken fireworks misadventure, the other a bucks party gone wrong. Time and propriety don't allow me to elaborate, but those front page stories are true. The NT News doesn't invent this stuff, although it does celebrate it. Trouser Snake on a Plane might be censored down south, but in the Tropo North it got the front page treatment. Sparing your conservative deep southern sensibilities, it was about a man described as a jack of all trades who performed an obscene act on a Darwin-bound flight.